2 days down, 1 day to go as the highest court in the land is dealing with the heart of the health care law, whether the federal government has the power to require you to buy health insurance or pay a fine. So are the justices giving any signals on which way they might rule? Let's ask Fox senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, we haven't heard the audio yet from today's courtroom session, but the breakdown we're getting in print about the questions the justices asked suggests that the court is kind of breaking down along the 4 liberal, 4 conservative line, with Justice Anthony Kennedy being the swing vote again.
And even though I was not in the courtroom and I have not listened to the audio yet, I'm about to do so as soon as you and I finish chatting, John. It appears that Justice Kennedy did ask some of the most profound and stinging questions, if you will, of the government, saying things like, well, how can the government create a market for the purpose of enabling it to regulate that market? And this is the profound question, he says to the Solicitor General, isn't it true that this law, if undisturbed, would profoundly change the relationship between the federal government and individual Americans? That is the core of the objection of those of us who follow the Constitution for a living have with this statute, is that it would change the relationship of the government to individuals without an amendment to the Constitution, simply by a vote of Congress.
Well, one of the arguments apparently that proponents of the law have made is that if you are born into this country, you are going to need health care at some point, and therefore it becomes a government matter. How do you address that?
Well, when Justice Ginsburg made an argument to that effect in the form of a question to one of the lawyers challenging the statute, the lawyer was Paul Clement, the former Solicitor General, Justice Scalia actually jumped in before Paul Clement could answer Justice Ginsburg's question and said, you know, you could say that with just about anything. You could say it with automobiles. You could say it with transportation. You could say it with food. You could say it with clothing. Yes, we all need these things. And yes, the fewer people that purchase them, the more it's going to cost for the rest of us. That doesn't give Congress automatically the authority to regulate that area of human behavior. Very, very telling and exceedingly sharp questioning. And in the case of Justices Scalia and Ginsburg, from one justice to the other, as opposed to from one justice to the lawyer.
You say that the Commerce Clause initially was brought into being in part to govern ferry fares between New Jersey, where you live, and New York, where we're sitting right now. How does that get blown up into the kind of, federal program we're looking at today in the health care law?
You know, one of the first major Commerce Clause cases had to do with the fare to get on a ferry from Hoboken to New York, and the Supreme Court said Congress can regulate it. Well, a couple generations later, Congress decided to regulate the wages of workers whose products were put onto the ferries to get from New Jersey to New York. And Congress said under the Commerce Clause they can regulate it. And a few generations later, Congress decided to regulate the workplace in which those workers worked, even if their products were not getting on the ferries. And the Supreme Court said Congress can regulate that. So by a gradual, slow, over the course of 150 years, addition to Congress's power, and the Supreme Court saying, yes, we now have a Congress that can regulate the strength of the flow of water in our showers in our home, the thickness of the shoes on our feet, the amount of ketchup and sugar. The regulations Congress has imposed and the courts have permitted is almost endless. And it looks like maybe we've reached the end of that line with this legislation.
Well, I suspect I now know how Justice Andrew Napolitano would rule were he sitting on the Supreme Court. But how do you predict this court will rule?
It's actually dangerous to predict. Having been on the bench, as you so nicely remind our viewers, sometimes you ask questions and it doesn't reveal how you think. But I do believe that the court will invalidate the individual mandate by a 5-4 vote. Justice Kennedy siding with the more traditional conservative justices. it remains to be seen what they do with the rest of the statute. There are substantial challenges tomorrow, John. Tomorrow the court addresses whether the Congress can tell the states what to do. The Congress has told the states, raise taxes and spend those new tax dollars as we're telling you to spend them. 26 states, obviously more than half, have challenged that. The court will address it tomorrow.
Going to be fascinating. Judge Andrew Napolitano, thanks for helping us understand it.
Thank you for calling me Justice.
Could